I'm Aaron Ballet, and this is me trying Guandao Fa, secretly transmitted methods of the Guandao. This is my series for talking all things Guandao. In this video, I'm going to be talking about this, an LK Chen Dao Polearm. But hold your horses there. Full disclaimer: at the time of filming this video, LK Chen does not make a Dao Polearm. This is a Dao Polearm that I made using the LK Chen Shangfeng Liao Dao, the Twin Peaks Liao Dao, and the LK Chen 8-sided Song Spear Pole Cap. I'll put links to both of these in the down below. So they do not make this weapon. I made this one myself. You should make one yourself, and that's why I made this video. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how I made it, and a little bit about how it performs. I previously converted another Dao Polearm using a Hanwei pudao. So here I have a Hanwei pudao, and then here I have one that I modified myself, and I made a video about the process of modifying that Dao Polearm to make it more like a late Ming Janma Dao, or just kind of a historical Dao Polearm. If you haven't seen that video on the Hanwei pudao, converting the Hanwei pudao, you might want to watch that video first. I'll put a link in the down below. But if you don't want to, you don't have to. I think this video will still make sense if you haven't seen that video. I actually purchased this sword secondhand from Justin Cho, or Chow. I'm probably mispronouncing his name. Apologies for that. He actually has a really cool project going on right now. He's doing a charity project in which he will be driving a 50cc moped from Prague to Kazakhstan. It sounds like a super cool project. He's going to be looking at Central Asian weapons, arms and armor along his journey. I'll put a link to the Kickstarter in the down below. It's a very cool project. I recommend you check it out and pitch it if you can. So before I get into the real specifics, just a general overview of how I made this weapon. So I took my haft, my pole, I cut a slot into it, I removed the handle and the pommel from the Liao Dao, and then I added a ferrule. I put it all together, pinned it in two places, and then and attached the pole cap at the bottom. So that's the kind of the basic idea of how it's constructed. But in order to talk about some more specifics, I'm gonna throw back to a video I made before I took the Liao Dao apart, and talk a little bit about the weapon as a sword before I destroy it. So take it away, Aaron from the past. All right, so my polearm project is well underway. I'm creating a slot in my haft that I'll eventually put the Liao Dao into. And so I'm getting close to a point where I want to remove the handle and the pommel. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about the Liao Dao as a sword before I destroy it. So I'm not going to do a review because other people have done excellent reviews of this, and I think I would just direct you to those. So I'll put some links in the down below. What I'll just say kind of briefly is that when I got it out of the box, I was kind of surprised, and I don't know why I was surprised. I shouldn't have been surprised. That it feels really good as a sword. It feels kind of very maneuverable. I mean, if you use Miao Dao, it's not the same as a Miao Dao. Obviously, there's much more curve to it. It's a much thicker blade. It's a shorter blade, but it has a pretty long handle. I guess Miao Dao usually often have a Miao Dao back here that also has a long handle. So I guess that's not unusual, but it's certainly different from a Miao Dao. If you do some kind of two-handed Dao work, yeah, I mean, you obviously you take one look at it, you're probably going to get something a little bit different. But it feels very maneuverable. It does feel kind of polearm-like, although, I'm a polearm guy, and when I go out and play with this, my hand's on the pommel the whole time, and I'm wishing there was just a little more for me to hang on to, and that's why I make it into a polearm. A lot of people kind of suggest that, that this is kind of the precursor to the Guandao, and I think there's kind of generally probably some truth to that. At this point in time, we see artwork that shows people wielding Dao polearms, especially on cavalry, and I think that's true for both the Liao, the Khizans, and the Jin. So these are two kind of cultures living at the same time alongside and at times against the Song. And so I think, probably the Guandao shares some DNA with this. I don't know if they're on the same branch of the evolutionary tree of blades, but, clearly this blade shape, this curved crescent blade, is vaguely similar, is pretty similar to a Guandao. Of course, obvious differences. It doesn't have the hook in the back, even though the Shuangfeng, the two peaks, it's probably kind of hard to see the two little bumps in the back. That's pretty common on Guandao. It's just that it would be smaller and be further up. So you'd have the hook, and then you have the two twin peaks. But another important difference, I think, is that the early Guandao had medial ridges, so they're actually thickest in the center of the blade. So you get like a diamond cross section, or maybe a rounded like oval or almond or eye-shaped cross section, whereas this is a wedge shape. It's thickest in the spine, and then it tapers to an edge. So so that's quite a bit different. But I mean, overall, it really is, quite similar to a Dao Polearm. It's just, shorter handle, bigger pommel. But a great sword. Hope someday I might get another one just to have as a sword. But for right now, I can't wait to make this into a polearm, so I'm going to get back to it.
So shortly after filming that video, I went on to disassemble the handle of my Liao Dao. And it was really very easy. I just took a chisel and hammer to the seam of the handle and just kind of worked my way down the seam and was very easily able to pry the handle off. The tang that I found underneath the handle looked nice and solid. It's about an inch at the base of the guard, and then it tapers to about 5/8 of an inch at the pommel. And the thickness is a little inconsistent. It kind of wavers from about 1/4 of an inch to 3/16 of an inch. And that's not like a consistent taper. It's a little thicker in some spots than it is in other spots. But I mean, that's fine. It's solid, and it's all hidden by the wood of the handle, so it works just fine. One thing that kind of surprised me about the construction of the handle was that the ferrule, the ring that was at the base of the guard, wasn't held in place by anything other than the handle itself. So there were no rivets and no glue. It just kind of loosely hangs there, but it's fitted to the handle, so the handle holds it in place.
Okay, so after removing the handle from my Liao Dao, I used an angle grinder to cut off the pommel, and I was ready to insert it into the pole. So the pole I was kind of separately preparing, and I made this elaborate jig, and I had all these plans on how I could create a slot to insert the tang of the sword into. And as these projects usually go for me, my tools broke, and I had all these complications, and my elaborate plan turned out to be a stream of improv and trying to figure out how to just get the next step done. But I was able, so I ended up cutting a slot into the pole using a small rotary tool, which is really not ideal. If somebody has better ideas about how to cut a, inch and an eighth deep hole slot into a pole, I'd love to hear it. Let me know in the down below. But the rotary tool was effective, and I got my slot cut. It probably won't be very easy to see here. Maybe I'll put some pictures or something. It's not pretty. There are a lot of parts where I ended up, dinging the haft with the rotary tool, and when you look up close, you definitely notice lots of little mistakes and lots of little problems. But that's just kind of the way it goes. Someday I'll redo it when I'm, better at doing this kind of thing, and it'll look way better. But that is definitely the most difficult part of the process, I think, for both of the Daos the Dao Polearms that I've created. But so I created the slot, and then I put the tang of the Liao Dao inside, and I put in 2 wood pegs, same as the construction of the handle of the Liao Dao sword itself. I shaped the top of the haft so that I could put my own ferrule. Historically, a ferrule like this would have been bronze or maybe iron, steel. Most of the ones I've seen are bronze. I just used a piece of copper pipe, which isn't probably ideal, but it's kind of widely available and pretty easy to work with, and I feel like it probably does the job reasonably well for my purposes. And then I shaped the bottom half of the shaft to fit the butt spike. Then I put everything together. I put plenty of glue. I also put a strip of wood, a small dowel into the extra space left by the slot, and this actually ended up being, I guess I would say that I didn't do a great job kind of making it flush with the haft, so it kind of still juts out a little bit, but on the plus side, that is very helpful for indexing. So whenever people talk about polearms, and I've definitely talked about this before, I feel like a huge part of the conversation always ends up being, what's the shape of the haft, and what's the cross section, because a circular cross section is probably the worst thing you could have for indexing. Your hands can't tell which way is forwards and which way is backwards. But I have to say that, I've seen a little bit of evidence that suggests that some Guandao in pre-modern China did not have a circular haft, but maybe had a slightly ovular or, not quite perfectly circular cross section. But I've seen a lot more evidence, and some conclusive evidence, from people who have handled the antique weapons before, that at least some of them were circular cross section. I definitely agree that having a different shape, something more ovular or square, is better for indexing, and I have a polearm that's like that. But historically, they often weren't. So I think it's totally fine to have a regular circular cylindrical haft, maybe more historically accurate. And also, I think that from my own practice, it's not that big of a deal for me. I think having a circular haft is just fine. And with a blade shape like this, it's actually much easier to keep edge alignment. Just the kind of the way the curve is so extreme towards the end of the blade, you can feel just kind of by moving your hands around where the front and back are. Probably not as well as you could if you had a different cross-section shaped haft, but still pretty good. And then at the end, all it takes is a couple of coats of wood stain and some tung oil, and then it's ready to go. And this Dao polearm felt very comfortable to me from the get-go. It feels very solid. I think having done one before, I knew what I was doing a little bit more, and it came out, a little bit better. Every time's a little bit better. Some lessons learned on the first Dao polearm that I made, that I modified. I didn't put in a ferrule, and I wish I had, and I would definitely do that in the future. Maybe next time I'll upgrade the copper ferrule to something more historically accurate, like iron or something. But I think that's definitely a good addition that's not that difficult to add. So another kind of lesson learned I have from the first time that I put together a more or less historical Dao polearm using the Hanwei pudao is just kind of some lessons about length and balance. So when I started off with the Hanwei pudao, I wanted to make the weapon kind of very long and very heavy, because most of the weapons I'd been using previous to that were too light, kind of the wushu style Guandao. So I wanted to experience something that was more heavy and more and closer to historical sources. Originally, I had a Soroder Greek style spear cap at the end of it. So not culturally appropriate, but it was the biggest one I could find. That seemed like it was roughly the right shape, and it's over a pound. It's really quite heavy, quite large. So I replaced that with the LK Chen 8-sided Song spear cap, which is lighter and smaller. So I tried to see how that affected the balance of the weapon. I also kind of gradually reduced the length of the haft to see what a shorter half length feels like. And after a fair amount of experimenting, I ended up, I think the most comfortable iteration I've found so far was having the Hanwei polearm with the LK Chen Song spear cap at a length of about maybe 86 or 88 inches. Which, so that 86 or 88, like a historical, comparing that with historical sources, so most of the historical texts give a length of 7 chi for a Guandao, which, depending on your conversion, would either be 88 inches or up to 96 inches. So if you're using 32 centimeters or 12.6 inches for 1 chi, that will give you the lower measurement of 88 inches. But Peter Decker at Mandarin Mansion often uses he's an antique dealer who's handled lots of Qing Dynasty weapons, and he uses a higher measurement of 35 centimeters for 1 chi, which would give you that higher length of 96 inches. Apologies for me to switching back and forth on conversion methods. There are some things that I always remember as centimeters and some things that I always remember as inches. I'll try to remember to put somewhere down here. But that's what the historical texts say. But then when you look at antique weapons, I've found that there are quite a few antiques that aren't that long, that just don't come to that length. So, and who knows if it's the case that, like, you know, the textual sources were always exaggerating the length and the real weapons were shorter, or whether it's just that the ones that have survived or the ones that are recorded, the antiques that we have today, maybe those ones are just shorter. Hard to say. But for me, for my money, probably around 86 inches with a lighter spear cap is more comfortable. I like to have the weapon more blade heavy. Originally, I thought that having a heavier spear cap would make it easier to swing the weapon, and that's true to some extent. It's kind of hard to describe, but in reality, I find that having the blade and more heavy, it just makes it much quicker for chopping and much kind of easier to swing around. But I think that it's very important, if you're able to play around with different kinds of balance, different kinds of lengths, different kinds of weights, and just different iterations, because it kind of teaches you how many different variables there are when you're putting a weapon together, and how huge an effect it can have on the balance of the weapon overall. So just a quick comparison of the Hanwei pudao versus the Liao Dao if you're going to make a Dao polearm. I'd say advantages of the Hanwei pudao are, first, that it is cheaper. Like I think it runs about $250 US plus shipping, which is a steal. Whereas the LK Chen Liao Dao, if you're buying it from LK Chen, I think it's around like $365 US, and then you got to pay a whole bunch of shipping from China. And then the Cult of Athena, I think at the time of making this video, they charge quite a bit for this, like I think between $400 and $500. So once you add shipping onto that, it's going to be quite a bit more expensive. The other advantage of the Hanwei pudao is that the tang is super long. When it comes in pudao form, it's a full tang weapon, which is just crazy. And that's really nice. It feels like a solid weapon. The haft feels heavier, and so the weight distribution is quite a bit different. It feels like there's more weight in the haft, and it's less at one end or the other, which is I can't say if it's better or not, but it definitely feels good. So the Liao Dao, on the other hand, the metal is obviously much better. It's higher quality metal. The Hanwei pudao it seems a bit soft. The Liao Dao has a better edge. I think if you're planning on cutting, I definitely recommend the Liao Dao over the Hanwei. And another big advantage from my perspective for the Liao Dao is that it's much easier to work with because it has a shorter tang. So the tang is, it's only about 15 or 16 inches long, and it's much easier to cut a short slot into the haft and just insert it that way than it is to deal with this super long tang. But overall, they're both great. I would recommend. My preference is for a smaller spear cap, and I really like the LK Chen Song spear cap. You know, it's not the same as what a historical Guandao cap would be, but you know, at least it's kind of it's culturally appropriate in some way, and I like that it's kind of small and keeps the the weapon more blade heavy. So that's all I have today. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Always appreciate a like and subscribe. Always appreciate a like and a subscribe. So if you have questions about how I put the weapon together or about how it performs, let me know in the down below, and I'll see you next time on Meituan Guandao Fa, secretly transmitted methods of the Guandao.